Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the SUSE WebTalk. Thanks for joining us today, and for the people who had never had a chance to get familiar with the SUSE WebTalk, we've been doing this since the beginning of the year, and each month we have a different session planned and a different subject that we can take care of. So the great thing about these sessions is that they're live, so you can ask your questions easily in the right side of your chat box, and we'll try to answer it as soon as possible. If the question cannot be answered, we'll set it on hold and we will answer it later on. At the end of the presentation, we will also open up our phone lines for those who just dialed in. We can so that they are able to ask their questions as well, of course. So thanks again, because today's subject is how to easily manage your Linux environment. I know that we're visiting a lot of customers today, and we see a lot of Linux server growth going on, and especially a big need on how to manage that. And SUSE has several solutions, but since I'm not the subject matter expert on this area, I dialed Joachim Werner, who's also on the line. And he's the one that's going to tell us today everything that you need to know about how to easily manage your enterprise Linux environment. So Joachim, I'm not going to introduce you. You can do that yourself, I think. But are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Good afternoon. And welcome to this web talk. Just a few quick words on myself. I've been working for SUSE for more than 10 years, and before that I was involved in open source for another couple of years, so I'm kind of a veteran. I'm now this senior product manager for systems management for SUSE. So I'm taking care of the products like SUSE Manager, the subscription management tool, but also looking at the management aspects of SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, YAST, AutoYAST, and all those parts of the stack that have to do with applying software updates, installing the system, and so on. Today I'm mainly going to focus on the product called SUSE Manager. So let's start with slide 4. First, we are going to look into the challenges that you are facing, and hopefully we are kind of grabbing the right points here. As Marijn mentioned before, you can always ask questions and help me with kind of customizing the presentation to the audience. We see growing data center complexity, which has become a real pain point, and it also becomes a vulnerability because the complexity gets much harder to manage. And as the previous cartoon picture shows, sometimes virtual machines or physical servers really multiply like rabbits. Next slide. Manually managing those systems is error prone. Like the picture shows, sometimes you're using the wrong tool. You need more automation, so things can be tested out once and then rolled out to many servers, so you can save time and also reduce manual error. Now, how does SUSE Manager address those challenges? SUSE Manager is automated Linux systems management that enables you to comprehensively manage both SUSE Linux Enterprise and also Red Hat Enterprise Linux with a single centralized solution, which also covers physical systems, virtual systems, and systems running in cloud environments. And as I mentioned, this helps you reduce complexity with automation. You can control and standardize and also optimize converged, virtualized, and cloud data centers. And the whole point, of course, is always reducing risk. Now, looking at manual versus automation. A few things that you can automate around systems management. First of all, we are mainly talking about patch management. That's still the most important tasks. So applying software updates, applying fixes to machines in a predictable and reliable way. You want to plan maintenance windows where you can apply those patches without unplanned interruption of service. You may want to bundle and execute related steps in one of those maintenance windows, the steps that you have prepared up front and tested in your QA environment. Other aspect, of course, is setting up new systems, so provisioning of systems, ideally in an unattended fashion, so highly automated again. And as soon as you have reached the end of life for a certain workload, you may want to redeploy another workload on a system without too much interaction. Let's say you have a number of database servers. At some point you think you need less database servers but more compute servers. You may want to repurpose the machine. Or you have new hardware, so you want to bring up a virtually identical system on new hardware without much effort. And part of that, of course, is also managing not only the smaller patches, but migrating to new service packs. So up to major releases, so going from, let's say, SLES 11 to Enterprise Server 12, which is going to be released later this year. Now, for the next slide, we always suggest to take a proactive approach to server management. So not only fix things when they come up, but perform regular management and provisioning tasks that have been prepared and that are scheduled. So you can improve your IT staff productivity. You can reduce server downtime because, first of all, you move unplanned downtime into planned windows. And second, you make sure that systems don't go down because you've missed that update or because you've run into hardware problems that could have been predicted and so on. You can identify performance issues and limit your business impact. This is part of the monitoring features that SUSE Manager offers. In the end, reduce the cost of your Linux management. Another kind of related aspect is compliance and security. While compliance and security don't directly affect your uptime or your running your business, they make sure that you are running them in a secure way and that you can also prove that you are compliant and secure to government authorities or other bodies like the credit card industry, so you can follow those guidelines, for example, for the payment card industry standard PCI. SUSE Manager offers quite a few features around compliance and security. First of all, patch management itself, of course, is part of the compliance story. But we also have integrated OpenSCAP, which is an open source implementation of the SCAP standard that allows you to perform configuration and vulnerability scans. So you can define profiles. Some organizations publish ready-to-use templates for that, but you can always customize those and, let's say, check for file system permissions for certain packages that need to be installed or not installed on the machine, services that should be running or not running, and so on. Another important aspect is how we tie the patch management into the CVE standard. So CVE, Common Vulnerability and exploit numbers. Those are numbers that are given to any critical security issue that is found on any operating system. So also for Linux, of course. And those numbers are then used by us when we deliver a patch to our customers, and SUSE Manager can download all that data, and you can very easily identify which machines need with what kind of patch. You can create reports of all the machines that are affected or already fixed. And this makes it really easy to stay compliant by basically just scanning those CVE numbers coming in from the upstream website www.mitre.org. And that's what a lot of security teams do. They basically scan for those numbers and watch carefully whether those CVEs have been fixed by the vendor and whether those patches have been applied. Another aspect is by centralizing systems management using SUSE Manager, you prevent unauthorized parties from accessing information or modifying the system. So nobody really has to be root or has to have root access, administrator access on any of those servers. They could all go through the SUSE Manager console. In the console, you can limit admins to only being able to manage certain parts of the machine and certain machines, and everything is logged. So you can keep a tight log of all activities for auditing purposes, track all the changes that happened on the server, and keep history. So this helps with achieving security and regulatory compliance. With automated operating system tracking and auditing processes using the Open ASCAP framework, you also can ensure consistency across the data center with a centralized management. Very quickly comply with audits because all those reports are available at a fingertip, and you can create your own report templates if you have special needs. Also, you can make sure that the auditor only has to work with a SUSE Manager console. They don't have to actually use their own scanning tools against your data center or go from machine to machine and check them one by one. And of course, automation of the actual vulnerability management, patch management as such, ties into that as well. And finally, this increases your IT security, obviously, not just to meet some compliance regulation, but to actually be secure, which is what you actually want. On the next slide, we are talking a bit about interoperability with, in this particular case, first of all, between SUSE and Red Hat. So SUSE Manager allows you to manage both SUSE Linux Enterprise Server and Red Hat Enterprise Linux, as I mentioned before. It's also interoperable in a way that you can run all the various, you can manage all the various hardware platforms, x86 32-bit, x86 64, Itanium, Power, S390X, the IBM System Z mainframes. As of version 2.1, SUSE Manager also can run on the mainframe. So customers who have mainframe-only Linux setups, they can keep it all on the mainframe. It is interoperable between systems that are physical, virtual, and in cloud environments. And finally, that's where Microsoft comes in. We have a plugin for Microsoft System Center Operations Manager that allows users of the Microsoft System Center console to perform most of the actions that SUSE Manager can perform directly through that tool. And that's an integration plugin, a so-called management pack, that can be of extra benefit in environments where most of the systems are predominantly Windows, but there is a Linux estate that should also be managed. It also ties in very nicely into the monitoring stack that Microsoft offers for Unix and Linux. So on the next slide, we are talking again about the overall benefits of doing systems management to optimize your IT operations. So think about lowering support and administration costs. Administration costs obviously because you can automate tasks, but also in the long run support costs go down. You can ensure the same service quality and availability across the data center because all the patches that you've rolled out on all the servers have been installed the same way. They've run through the same rigid pre-testing and staging and so on. You can gain agility and achieve a positive return on investment very quickly. There have been a few studies around management tooling in general, but also around SUSE Manager and Satellite Server from Red Hat, which both are based on the same basic framework called Spacewalk, and they prove that the return on investment is positive within a couple of months. Optimizing and expanding your T environment also gets easy, because as soon as you have all those blueprints set up, it's relatively easy to add new systems and roll out additional instances using the provisioning tooling. And finally, you can achieve automation across various IT platforms and environments in your data center. And as I said earlier, this spreads even into the cloud. Now, here are a few examples of how some of our customers have benefited from SUSE Manager. At the moment, we've got almost 250 customers running SUSE Manager worldwide in various stages of rollout. One of the largest by far is Rackspace, the international hosting company. Their challenge was that they had been working with Red Hat, and Red Hat announced the end of support for RHEL 4. The Red Hat Network Satellite was only supporting RHEL. They didn't have another operating system option to choose from. And Spacewalk had some limitations, so that the free version they could choose from that didn't come with support, and it wasn't really enterprise ready. So they wanted a flexible solution, and that's what we were able to help them with. SUSE Manager is able to manage their old RHEL 4, their CentOS that they've been using for some part of the business, and of course also SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. We bundled in SUSE Linux Enterprise Server with expanded support. That's our offering to customers who want support for Red Hat-based Enterprise Linux, either RHEL or CentOS, from a second source, which would be SUSE in this case. And yeah, SUSE Manager helped them with their scaling challenges. So what we've done for Rackspace is set up SUSE Manager clusters. So they have HA setups, which we don't usually support, but together with SUSE Consulting, we can make those very large installations happen. And this has been rolled out in several data centers. I think it's like 8 data centers worldwide or so. And the result has been cost savings, both because of lower subscription costs, but also because of the tooling that SUSE Manager has added to the story, and they have been able to massively improve their customer satisfaction and become more competitive. Another very nice example is Apollo Optic, one of the largest European optical retailers. And by the way, they are not the only optical retailer that SUSE sells to. We have a lot of retailers, and also quite a few of those optical retailers in the US and in Europe that are using SUSE. In this particular case, they had a very complex setup to solve. They have a variety of old and new hardware. They wanted to replace outdated systems over time. And the solution is a bit more complex. It's not just SUSE Manager, but a combination of SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service, SUSE Manager, and also some tooling provided using the open SUSE Build service that is supported by a SUSE partner in this case. And the SUSE partner also has created a smooth and fully automated workflow that helps with automated server deployment. Basically, they can unpack a box, scan the box's MAC address from the barcode, and enter the shop ID, and all the rest has been automated, including setting up a base system, and on top of that, virtualize the actual workload for the store. And this is all this has been a tremendous success. And finally, an example from insurance, Delta Lloyd Insurance, again a German company. Delta Lloyd Insurance was another case where there was a Red Hat estate and they were under pressure. They had some SUSE Linux because of the SAP, and they were looking for a combined solution. And again, in this case, the main reason for choosing SUSE Manager really was that it can do both Red Hat and SUSE. And this was a business case where they saved a lot of money by reducing subscription costs and became much more flexible because now they can basically choose between two enterprise OS choices and still keep the same tooling. There are a lot of other success stories that we are working on from different industries. So whatever industry you are in, I'm pretty sure that we have somebody using SUSE Manager in that industry, be it automotive, industry, banking, finance, anything you can think of. Now, the next step for you would of course be, and that's on the next slide, to try SUSE Manager today. So you can download version 2.1 from downloadsuse.com, and you can join the pilot program. And I've got a few more slides because we've time left that were meant to be backups, but I think we can use them. So on the next slide, that's where we...
Yeah, let me check on that. Just one sec. This should do it.
First of all, this slide shows you again basically the whole portfolio of features that SUSE Manager has to manage the life cycle of an operating system. In the inner circle, the gray fields, those are all the features from asset management. When you register a new system, there's the hardware and software asset inventory sent to the server, provisioning new machines, package and patch management, so adding new functionality but also patching fixes, configuration management, and the redeployment part I manage. So when a machine has reached its end of life in terms of the installed workload, you can repurpose the machine. And then the outer circle is about the compliance and monitoring features. So we have health monitoring, the compliance features I talked about, OpenSCAP and CVE search and so on, and the security features. Now on the next slide, we are going into a bit of more detail of what we did with the recent release of SUSE Manager 2.1. A large focus was on usability enhancement, especially for making it easier to set up SUSE Manager. There's a setup wizard that really guides you through all the basic steps and gets you up to speed very quickly. This is part of the much improved web UI that is now also scalable on mobile screen, so you can work with it on an iPad or another tablet, for example. Action chaining is our first step towards full automation of multiple steps. There are two ways of doing that, either using the API that can be scripted in, let's say, Python or Perl or Java. And with this feature, the action chaining feature, you can use the UI and in the UI create a chain of things you want to do in one step, rearrange them until it's all fine, and then you can execute it in one transaction in a maintenance window. Yeah, that's basically it on the usability enhancements. On the next slide, there's another motif, the provisioning enhancements. What we call unattended bare metal system provisioning is a very nice feature that we added, inspired by how most of the cloud setup frameworks work. So basically you can take a physical box, make sure that it is in PXE boot mode, so when it comes up it would contact a PXE boot server, And that's basically all you have to do. The machine will be automatically registered to SUSE Manager, and then you can go to the web front end and from there assign a profile to that machine and install the machine completely remotely. And this also has a security aspect that we mentioned, and that's basically that you can keep machines offline after putting them in the rack, but we can wake them up using IPMI later and install them when needed. In patch management, one interesting new feature was package locking. So that means that you can lock certain packages, let's say the kernel. That's mainly used if your software vendor like SAP would say, okay, you can only use this software with kernel version XYZ. This is the certified one. Then you can, just for one box, you can lock a certain package and say, even if there is an update for that box, don't apply it because you need this specific version. Yeah, next one. That's, I think we managed most of to cover most of that already. That's the compliance and security enhancements, the CVE number search and reporting, and the OpenSCAP support that has been massively improved. Power management I very briefly mentioned. This is a first start. We have IPMI support for switching machines on and off and rebooting them, and we want to add more to that. Ultimately, also adding things like remote provisioning of an ISO media through IPMI, so you can boot from that media if Pixie boot is not an option. Next slide. Yeah, now we are talking again about the next steps.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's what Marijn can tell you more about. It's the proof of concept program, something that we in product management think is a very good idea from the Benelux team. Yep. That we've been supporting very actively.
Yeah, because that's one thing that you mentioned earlier in your presentation. One of the next steps is that you can download the software, of course, and try to install it yourself. But one of the great things that we have developed is the step-by-step proof of concept program. If you want to participate, it's going to cost you like 12 weeks total time, and that's including setting up the complete environment, which has, of course, the software and also the registration keys. But we will also help you step by step with setting up the blueprints and the best practices, of course. Because what we do is on a weekly basis inform you about the things that we're going to do the next week. And we can also have a chat together with the other participants on the challenges that we have during that week. So you can exchange everything that you would like to do with other companies as well who are in the same proof of concept program. So we're going to start our next proof of concept program September 16. You can still participate if you'd like. So what I will do is after the presentation, including sending you the slide deck, of course, also invite you and send you the extra details on this entirely program. Normally we would say that it's going to cost the companies that will join a commitment for €1,000. But as a compensation for your time spent today, we would like to offer you free of charge to participate in this proof of concept program. So I think that was it for today. Next month we have another SUSE WebTalk, of course. This time we're going to talk about SAP applications and how to optimize your SAP environment. I want to thank Joachim for taking the time to present everything that is shown us today. As mentioned before, I will gather all of the information and we will send that out to you. I think it's time for questions. Let me see if I'm able to open up everybody that's on the phone. Are there any questions for the ones that are on the phone? The line is open now. If you want to have questions, you can also put them into the chat box, or you can save them. Send me an email later on, and we will try to answer it as soon as possible. I don't know what happened here. I think you've made a great impression, Joachim, and that everybody's fully up to date on where we are today. If there are no further questions, we're going to close off this call. Thanks again. We'll hope to see you next month for the SAP environment call. And I wish you a great holiday season for those that go on a holiday. Thanks for joining.